When you think about big presidential trips overseas, you usually picture high-stakes diplomacy, right? Grand strategies.
Hmm.
But what if a really key visit was actually more about, well, something a bit more concrete?
Yeah, that's what we're diving into today.
Exactly. We're looking at President Trump's recent trip to Saudi Arabia, but specifically through the lens of a Fox News report. It gives a particular take on the goals and, the outcomes.
Right. We've gone through the transcript from a Fox News YouTube piece on this, and our goal here really is to understand um, the main objectives and messages they're pushing about this trip. Sort of get past the headlines.
See, what they're really focusing on is the
It's right.
purpose.
So, what's the core idea behind the visit? At least according to this report.
Okay, let's get into it then. So, right off the bat, this Fox report seems keen to show a big difference from, how things were done before.
A contrast.
Yeah, they paint this picture of Trump arriving, the Saudi crown prince meeting him right at the steps of Air Force One, fighter jets flying overhead.
And they make a point of saying this wasn't the case for President Biden in 2022, apparently.
Right. So what's the significance there? Why focus so much on those arrival visuals?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Highlighting those optics, it's more than just showing respect. It feels like a deliberate signal.
To who?
Well, to the Saudis, obviously, but maybe also to people back home. It suggests maybe a reset in the relationship, perhaps something more, let's say, transactional.
And it wasn't just visual cues, was it?
Yeah.
The report says Trump made some pretty sharp comments, too,
Oh, yeah.
taking aim at nation builders, neocons, liberal nonprofits, mentioned failures like in Kabul, Baghdad.
And that quote, they wrecked far more nations than they built.
That's pretty blunt. Sounds like a direct rejection of a certain kind of foreign policy.
Absolutely. If you connect the dots, that criticism, it points to a real shift in philosophy, doesn't it? Nation builders. That's usually about, going in and trying to reshape political systems.
Right. Interventionism.
Yeah, and neoconservatives often link to promoting democracy abroad, sometimes militarily. Trump's words here, they signal a definite move away from that.
But the report suggests the trip wasn't just about criticizing the past. The main focus seemed to be, well, business, investment, commerce.
Very much so.
It talks about this massive $600 billion investment deal with the Saudis. Includes what they call the largest arms deal ever, $142 billion.
Wow.
Seems like the economic angle was front and center.
Definitely. The report really pushes this idea of Trump having this optimistic vision for the Middle East centered around commerce, not chaos.
Exporting technology, not terrorism, building cities together.
Right. It suggests a deliberate choice to prioritize economic connections as the way to, build stability and cooperation.
And it wasn't just government-to-government stuff either. They mentioned all these Fortune 500 CEOs at Trump's speech.
Yeah, that list was quite something. Elon Musk, Larry Fink, Sam Altman, Reid Hoffman, Jensen Huang.
That's a serious lineup.
Oh,
What does having them there signal, you think,
yeah.
in the context of this trip?
Well, it really underlines that economic focus, doesn't it? Having these huge business figures present. It makes you wonder about the message, who the key players are in this new approach.
And the report connects this to discussions about a path to peace in the form of commerce.
Yeah, and this idea that other countries in the region are absolutely open to and supported, recognizing the Jewish state, its independence and its sovereignty, it ties it all back to economics.
Suggesting that shared business interests might override old political fights.
That seems to be the idea presented, that mutual economic gain could, bridge some of those divides.
The report even quotes Trump saying, "There are no permanent enemies. I offer a new path, an alternative to peace and commerce and partnership."
Right. That quote really sums up the philosophy they're attributing to the trip, doesn't it? Moving away from ideology-driven conflicts towards more pragmatic deals based on shared interests.
Like rival companies finding a way to work together on something big.
Exactly. The past issues become less important than the current shared goal.
Okay, but you can't talk Middle East without talking Iran. That's always central.
True.
The report notes Trump saying Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. That's consistent. But it also mentions a shift to maximum pressure, saying there's no talk anymore about bombing Iran.
Hmm.
How do you read that? It seems like a slight but maybe important change in tactics.
It's interesting, the adjustment there, the hard line on a nuclear Iran is still there, but this maximum pressure focus, it suggests leaning more on economic tools, diplomatic pressure,
Rather than immediate military threat.
at least that's the message conveyed around this trip. Maximum pressure, that usually means heavy sanctions, diplomatic isolation, trying to force a change without direct military action.
The report also throws in this detail about a new Sunni president in Syria, described as a former U.S. sanctioned figure from the Nusra Front.
Yeah, that adds a whole layer of complexity, doesn't it? It raises questions about the pragmatism involved, weighing strategic goals like stopping Iran using Syria as a base against, well, the potential implications of engaging with such figures.
It definitely makes things more complicated.
For sure. It highlights the kind of difficult choices involved in pursuing these broader regional goals.
Another big angle in the Fox report was countering China's influence.
Right, pushing back against Beijing in the Middle East.
Specifically, stopping China from getting too close to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, what the report calls the Middle East Circle of Friendship.
That's a huge geopolitical piece. And if you link that to the AI leaders being on the trip and a meeting planned in Abu Dhabi,
It starts to make sense.
yeah, the U.S. wants to strengthen its own tech partnerships there. The report notes the U.S. leads in AI, then China, then the UAE, which is apparently pretty advanced in some specific AI areas,
So the idea is to foster U.S.-UAE AI cooperation.
and steer it away from China, potentially. Keep that technological edge and partnership within that circle of friendship.
This all seems to fit with that phrase mentioned again in the report. No permanent enemies, only permanent interests. They even used Reid Hoffman being there, someone who apparently funded legal efforts against Trump, as an example of this.
Right, Molly Hemingway's observation. It really drives home that pragmatic, interest-first approach being presented. Ideology, past fights, they seem secondary if there's a strategic or economic interest to pursue.
A very transactional view of
It
things.
certainly appears that way based on this report's framing.
And finally, the report wraps this all up under the banner of peace through strength and prosperity through partnerships, presenting it as the alternative to warmongers and interventionists.
Yeah, it positions economic power, built through these partnerships and alliances, as the main way to guarantee security. The idea seems to be that a strong economy tied into these global deals is a better path to stability than, military interventions in complex situations.
Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive into this Fox News report, the key takeaways seem to be a huge focus on locking down investments,
Right, that $600 billion figure.
a clear move away from nation building and interventionism,
That criticism of past approaches.
the maximum pressure on Iran, but maybe dialing back the immediate military rhetoric,
A shift in tactics there.
a definite strategy to counter China, especially in tech partnerships,
Using AI cooperation as a tool.
and all underpinned by that permanent interests, economically driven approach.
Precisely. And what really stands out is how economic engagement is presented as perhaps the primary tool of U.S. foreign policy in the region now.
That feels like a potentially big shift.
It could be a departure from the more traditional security-first approaches.
Mhm.
And that, could have some major long-term effects on the whole region.
Which leads us perfectly to a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. How might this focus on commerce, on economic ties, really change things in the Middle East? How could it reshape alliances, affect stability?
Yeah. What are the potential upsides? Maybe more economic links mean more stability?
But also, what are the risks? If you prioritize business deals above everything else in such a complex, historically tricky region, could that create new problems, new vulnerabilities?
It's definitely something to think about, the long game, the consequences of putting economics right at the front of foreign policy like this.